Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. As I mentioned to you, I was gonna do, I was gonna follow up the part one of the video so as not to make it too long because I know people lead busy lives and those 3 hour videos, you know, like I said, when I did those, I was just talking and really didn't even realize, how much time was passing as I was talking until I finished. And I think even on one of them, I said 2 or 3 times, I'm going to stop it right here. And I think, sounding like them pastors say, I'm only going to be here for a little while. And, I ended up talking almost 3 hours. So I'm going to break it down. But I stopped off over in 1 Corinthians 9 and 14. And, I ended up saying, the master instituted that those announcing the Besorah should live from the Besorah. And I said that means their lives should mimic what the Bible teaches. And Strong's Concordance 1309 says Besorah means tidings. And tidings means piece of news. And I talked about, when we sing some old tidings of company joy. Y'all know the song that y'all learned growing up. Did you translate tidings in that song to money? So, because if not, if that's the case, why do we translate all those scriptures in the Bible to money instead of what it says? So those of us that teach the good news, lives should be representative of the good news. There's a New Testament professor named Simon Kistemaker, and he said this. In his Paul is talking about letters, he discloses that he worked night and day with his own hands to support himself so that he would no one would ever be able to accuse him of depending on the hearers of the gospel for his material needs. And he said, go back and compare 1 Samuel 12 and 3. He refused to be a burden to anyone in the churches he established. By performing manual labor, he provided for his financial needs. Paul received gifts from the believers in Philippi as he himself reveals. And it's in Philippians 2:25 and chapter 4, verses 16 through 18. Yet he declared that he did not solicit those gifts. The Ephesian elders had observed Paul's ministry and physical work during his 3-year stay. They were able to testify that he had never exploited anyone. That's 2 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 2. But he had always set an example of diligence and self-sufficiency in the good sense of the word. He was a model to the believers and taught the rule. If you will not work, you shall not eat. And as I mentioned, that's 2 Thessalonians 3 and 10. It appears that Paul generated sufficient income to support not only himself, but even his companions. Y'all know Timothy was one of his companions. In every respect, says Paul to the elders of Ephesus, I taught you to work hard and with your earnings to help the weak. He exhorts them to follow his example and to labor hard. Now, if that's Paul, where does your pastor line up with that? See, many of your pastors are so lazy that they even have secretaries. Why do they need a secretary? I've looked all throughout the Bible and I've never found a position pastor or church secretary. I mean, oh yeah, Ephesians 4:11 say, pastors. But let me read to you what, and I said pastors, that was plural. It never said pastor. But let me read to you what that verse actually says. And he himself gave some as emissaries, and some as prophets, and some as evangelists, and some as shepherds and teachers. Pastors ain't nowhere in that verse. But your current Bible substituted pastors for shepherds. And I told you on a previous video that shepherd could not be properly translated to pastor because Rachel, the daughter of Laban, was called a shepherdess. And if she was a shepherdess in the sense we translate shepherd to mean pastor, then that invalidates the verses in Timothy on qualifications of an elder or a bishop. So is Timothy wrong? Are the translators wrong? Or are your pastors wrong? Now, you have to think about that because of those 3 choices, only one's in the Bible. The pastors say they love God with all their heart, right? Take their salary away for good and let's see how much they love God. They're going to exit that church so fast, sing out a new pulpit as fast as they can to stand in and fleece the people. See, Paul actually condemns those that have made a living out of preaching for pay. He condemns those that have turned the gospel into what he calls a means of gain. That means he condemns every single paid preacher that exists today. Every one of them. Why won't your pastors teach this? It's because Paul is condemning them. You know, so many men have turned religion into financial gain. You know, you heard, a few years ago, some of these big name pastors out there, apologize for, what they said they was exploiting the people and taking money and all that. Did you ever hear either one of them or see an instance where either one of them gave that money back to anybody? And they might not have been able to determine individually, and that's a lie because they keep books on how much everybody give because they want to know who's more important in church than others. Depending on how much you give, that determines how important you are to them. But even if they couldn't figure it out, why haven't they donated all that ill-gotten gain to some charity? Why haven't they take all them millions they've gotten and build facilities for homeless, or built schools, or fed the hungry? But they said they exploited the people and they apologized, but their lifestyle ain't changed. They still living off that money. They still preaching right today. So Paul condemns that behavior. So many men have turned religion into financial gain, and that was their whole purpose. And see, if you really understand everything I've been talking about, others have been talking about, religion is a means of exploitation, but true Bible teaching isn't. They use religion to run the slave trade. They didn't use the Bible. They used religion. That's why they took the Bible away from the people they enslaved. Because if them people would have had them Bible, they would have knew all of them folks was lying. See, the younger folks couldn't get the Bible, so all you got to do is wait for the elders to die off, and you took the Bible away from the elders, so the elders can't pass on any awareness and knowledge to the younger people. So the younger people, not having access to the same Bibles that their forefathers and foremothers had, are going to just go with what they've been taught. That's why they didn't like Nat Turner. So religion is a means of exploitation. See, I told you earlier, and I've told you on other videos, the word Christian in Christianity is nowhere in the Bible. That means every religion that sprang from Christianity is a flawed system. Many of your pastors are nothing more than paid religionists. I used to think, how could a black person become a Mormon? Knowing the history of Mormonism. And then after more study, I asked, how could a black person be a Catholic after studying the history of Catholicism? Then I asked myself, how could a black person become a Jehovah's Witness after studying their beliefs? Then me being raised Baptist, I asked, how could a black person become a Baptist? As I continued to study, I asked myself, how could any black person identify with and follow Christianity? And see, I mentioned earlier, I did a video a while back teaching about the way being what the Bible followers identified with long before Gentiles grabbed a hold of the Bible and changed everything. See, I think I got another video, a short video, where I talked about, I think, is the Bible a Hebrew roots book or a Roman roots book? Well, today's Bibles are Roman roots books. They're not Hebrew roots books, and the Bible is supposed to be a Hebrew roots book. What we got is the Gentile version of the Bible now. We don't have the Hebrew Bible anymore. That's why most of your pastors hate the Apocrypha, because you can't Gentilize the Apocrypha. They ain't had time to Gentilize the Apocrypha. And that's why most of your pastors will reject it right now. Start talking to them about the Apocrypha. Well, that ain't canon. We ain't got no witnesses there. If you go to cepher.net, I believe the site, it talks about why they have the Apocrypha in there. And they talk about how the Apocrypha was canon. Don't take my word for it. Do your own research. See, when I tell pastors that I've studied something, I've studied it. But when a pastor tells me, how do you know? But they haven't studied nothing. What they're saying is, I don't appreciate you challenging my thought process because my brain been pickled. I don't care about no pastor getting mad at me. I don't care. At this point in life, I don't care about nobody getting mad at me. I'm trying to help you. I ain't asked you for no money for none of my videos. Not one. I just put it out there. But these guys who sitting up there in that pulpit exploiting you, they got a problem with teaching like this. And it ain't just me. See, paid pastors would be condemned by the Apostle Paul today. Because, you know what? He condemned them back then. And he would still be condemning today if he were living. I guarantee you, Paul and the other apostles were living today, most of the men in the pulpit will be doing something other than preaching. I mean, your pastors are just like companies that sell product laced with sugar, that take some of the proceeds from the sale of the product and then donate them to the American Diabetes Foundation. They make profits off of making people sick and then contribute to the problem they help create. They protect their interests by making you think they are benevolent. If a pastor ever gets a conscience and starts to really teach and follow Paul's words, he's going to stop preaching. I tell you, I guarantee you, they're not going to stick around if they're not getting paid. Now, some of them will stick around, because they might have had other careers in their lifetimes and, they got pensions and retirement money coming in. So it's no big thing for them. What they get their rocks off on is the power of the position. So they won't leave it if they're not getting paid because they got an income coming in. They love the prestige that comes with the position because they know people respect titles and positions. See, most people in churches would never actively study their Bible, and that's why they remain stuck spiritually. Because there's no way people can be looking at the same Bible all these years and don't have questions. That's why I've said in the past, I love atheists. Atheists will make you up your Bible study game. Because every time an atheist has challenged me, I go to my Bible. And, in my mind, I'm saying, thank you. Thank you for challenging me. Because I want to go see if what they said is true. So most people are never going to actively study their Bibles. And they're going to remain stuck. You can't tell me you done looked at a Bible for, I ain't going to even say 20, because when you're 20, most of us are still out there, well, I've never been a big club person, but most people around in their 20s are still popping in clubs and, partying, having a good time and all that. And I just wasn't into all of that stuff, I went to the Kappa Beach parties a couple of times. I went to the Freaknik one time. But, I did that to see what it was like, and I got it out of my system. It wasn't all that. I mean, I enjoyed myself while I was at the places, but it wasn't all that. But I remember, I just didn't like the club. Like, man, you go in this place. I didn't like alcohol, so it wasn't that. And people there smoking cigarettes, weed, and all that stuff, and you leave out and your clothes smell like all that funk. And I'm like, man, people call this exciting? I remember when I was in college, some of the guys that grew up with me saw me in a club one night. I think I've been to a club maybe 3 times my whole life. I went, one of my cousins got married, and all guys in a wedding party decided, they were going to go to the club, and they took me with them. Come on, Byron, let's go. And I went then, and then guy I used to work with invited me out to a Halloween party at a club when I was in college. And then I went 4 times. One of my teammates at University of Houston got drafted in the NFL, and we went to the club with him. And one of the last time I went in, I don't know who invited me because I never went to the club on my own. And when I walked in, some of the guys who had grew up with me said, "Byron in the club? Oh, that's something new and different." I just didn't like it. And young lady I dated before I met my wife, she loved the club. And she had her reasons, but it just wasn't me. And so most of us in our 20s, we're not going to really get into studying the Bible. We'll start kind of maybe touching on it. I mean, we'll go to church, when we're available. I was in retail management for a long time, so most of my Sunday was spent at work. And knowing what I know now, I wasn't missing nothing on Sunday anyway, because Sunday is not the Sabbath. And so it is what it is. I mentioned about, pastor telling my daddy, who all worked a lot of Sundays, you should be working on Sunday. And my daddy told him, stop getting paid on Sundays, I stopped working on Sunday. Pastor never said nothing to him again. But see, stuck Christians is exactly where lying pastors want them to be. They want the congregation stuck in the thought process that they themselves have given their congregation. See, charlatans have been teaching for gain for a long time, even in Paul's day. How can I say that? Well, I didn't. Paul did it. Where does Paul say that? Well, in 2 Corinthians 2:17, Paul writes, "For we are not, as so many, adulterating the word of Elohim for gain, but as of sincerity, but as from Elohim in the sight." The easier to read version of the Bible states it this way. Certainly, though, not those who are out there selling God's message for a profit, but we don't do that. With Christ's help, we speak God's truth honestly, knowing that we must answer to him. Now, that says a whole lot. See, any pastor that makes his living from the church is nothing more than a common crook. He's a thief. I did the videos on coveting a couple of years ago. Well, 2024 now, maybe close to 3 years ago. I did the videos on coveting. Thou shalt not covet. Those men in the pulpit are nothing but called covetous wolves. Paul even called them wolves. The Messiah called them wolves. Ravenous wolves, called them a couple other types of wolves too, gray wolves, something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head, but they're nothing more than common criminals. Why do the people sitting in the pews put up with this despicable behavior from men who are too lazy to work? Why? Because it goes back to something I said earlier. The people sitting in the pews do not read their Bibles. We have even allowed these men over the centuries to change the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday. These men said, forget what God put in place. We want to change it. We're going to do it our way. I think it was a song, old rap song, say, "Do it my way." I think it might be a kid that played, "Do it my way." That's what these men have done. They said, we're going to do it my way. They're going to do it my way. See, me and my wife were literally sitting in a church one Sunday, and the pastor went into a PhD dissertation on why the Sabbath was changed to Sunday. And, well, I tell you, he used that Bible to justify it. I mean, he was so charismatic that I believed him. And I believe what he taught that Sunday because I had questions for years. I had questions because I had studied back in my 20s, around my mid-20s. I said, the Sabbath day is Saturday. But, over the years, I've heard different pastors talk about, why we worship on Sunday. And I never got into a whole lot of study when I was younger. And I heard Pastor, you can celebrate the Sabbath any day of the week. The Sabbath is every day now. It's not just Saturday. And I mean, back then I'm like, okay, these guys have studied the Bible more than me. So, okay, I'll go with that teaching. And after that happened, I said, no. I said, no, he explained it. Something just don't sit right. Another time, he explained why we celebrate Christmas. And then I started studying why we really celebrate Christmas. And then he started talking about, other occasions he was talking about God chosen people being the Jews. And that's when it really opened my eyes. I said, okay, we used to play the game, kid, 1, 2, 3, red light. No, something like Keith Sweat used to say, something just ain't right. Because Jews and Judah ain't the same people. And so, but I believed him and what he taught that Sunday. But then y'all have heard me mention I've always been a student. Well, I started reading the Bible more on that subject, and I said, no, I don't come to the same conclusion that he just tried to sell us. Your pastor's lazy. They don't want to work. Remember the story I mentioned once before, or a few times before, from Booker T. Washington, when he said that a farmer got tired of plowing that field in that heat every day? And he looked up to the sky one day to heaven and he said, Lord, I believe this Negro was called to preach. That's how many of your pastors are. They don't want to go out and earn an honest living. They want you to pay for their lifestyles. See, this had to be a major problem in Paul's day like it is today. Sadly, we don't have many men teaching this today. If they're teaching like this, they don't get any airtime, or they'll get silenced by the fleecing pastoral majority. And that's really sad. Paul talked about this a lot. And 1 Thessalonians 4, chapter 4, verses 11 and 12, he writes, and to make it your ambition to live peaceably and to attend to your own and to work with your own hands, as we commanded you, so that you behave decently toward those who are outside and not be in any need. I mean, can it be any clearer than that? Paul said the word. Nowhere in that do we see teach and attend to your own. He said to work and attend to your own needs. 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 11 and 12. Ain't that amazing? 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 11 and 12. 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 11 and 12. Paul says, until the present hour we both hunger and thirst, and we are scantily clad and beaten and homeless and labor, working with our own hands, being cursed, we bless, being persecuted, we suffer. See, Paul said they were hungry and homeless, beat down, yet they carried on. Your pastor won't even push forward if you don't get him enough money. Here, Paul and his men were clinging to life, and they were still teaching. They were clinging to life and still working. Yet your pastor get a little cough and he can't preach this Sunday. Amazingly, he knows this on the Tuesday before. You ever notice how your pastor never gets sick when he takes a vacation, or he attends a seminar, or he attends a conference, all at the expense of the church? Acts 28 and 30 says, and Shaul stayed 2 entire years in his own rented house and was receiving all who came to him. Shaul is Paul. You see, Paul paid for the place for the people to come and hear the word. Let me say that again. Paul paid out of his own pocket for the facility where the word was being taught. Today, you have to pay for the place, and you have to bring the people to the place. And when you bring the people to the place that you paid for, the pastor even extends the honor for your guests to pay for the usage of the place and his salary as well. I mean, that's a real hustler. Or as rapper Ice-T said, New Jack hustler. In 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 7 and 8, it says, Or did I commit sin and humbling myself in order to exalt you because I brought good news, the Basura of Elohim to you without being paid? Without being paid. Other assemblies I robbed by receiving wages from them to serve you. See, you have to remember, sometimes Paul struggled to find work when he was traveling. In a couple of instances, some brothers in the faith sent him money to take care of his need, people in Macedonia, for example. And I mentioned Philippi. See, Paul said he did not seek what belonged to the people. Paul actually said the person teaching should be paying the people listening to the teacher. That's over in 2 Corinthians 13 and 12. See, Paul was so serious about not fleecing the people that he goes on to say in verses 17 and 18, did I take advantage of you by any of those whom I sent to you? I urged Titus and sent our brother with him. Did Titus take advantage of you? Did we not walk in the same spirit? See, Paul said all of his men thought the same way because they were taught the same way. Paul was saying he knew the guys he taught were never going to take advantage of the people. Can you say that about your pastor? Some people put a great deal of money in churches because they have not studied the Bible for themselves. Many of these men are deacons in their churches, but ain't no way they're going to challenge their pastor. They love being slaves. I've heard many pastors say the deacons don't have the right to check him. Well, if you don't have no checks and balances, how are things going to remain in order? They love being slaves. They're not servants, they're slaves. See, pastors love to say they will do anything for God. But they'll do anything but get a job for God. They receive a salary based off your false tithes, and then they will turn around and pay tithes off of your money that you have already paid taxes on. Tithing puts you in a situation of double taxation. I mean, is this not a Ponzi scheme at the most spiritual level? See, Paul was clear about burdening people with financial obligations that your family should also be assisting with. See, it says in 1 Timothy 5, 16 and 17, if any believing man or woman has widows, let such assist them, and do not let the assembly be burdened, in order to assist those who are truly widows. Let the elders who rule well be counted worthy of double respect, especially those who labor in the word and teaching. Now, notice how this version says respect and not honor. Then it was changed to honor, and then many of your pastors changed the word honor to mean money. These dudes need to be thrown under the church. If the Bible said don't burden the assembly with financial obligations pertaining to widows, why would it all allow able-bodied men to be taken care of? Let me say that again. If the Bible said don't burden the assembly with financial obligations pertaining to widows, women who've lost their husband, widows with children, because you can read some more in that in Timothy, why would that same Bible allow able-bodied men to be financially taken care of by the assembly, causing a burden? Now, in verse 8 of that same chapter, it says, and if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the belief and is worse than an unbeliever. See, the Bible says if you don't provide for your own family, you are worse than an unbeliever. Receiving pay from your congregation is not providing for your family. The congregation is providing for your family, not you. See, many of these pastors today are nothing more than leeches, sucking the blood life out of people, or life blood out of people, however you want to say it. You know, although I grew up and I was baptized by a pastor who worked a full-time job, and he never took a salary from the church, he still faithfully taught from Malachi 3. Faithfully. You know, that was the reading every time, the associate minister would get up on Sundays before the election. I mean, I said election, the collection plate. I won't say election plate. Some of them passed them too. But anyway, but he taught from Malachi 3. And you know, he died, like I said, going into my senior year. I had just finished up my junior year in high school. And he and I had a really good relationship, you know, for the years I got to spend with him. And the pastor that replaced him said God told him to quit his job and become a full-time pastor. See, Proverbs 30:14 says, the leech has two daughters. And the Bible said that. I didn't say that. The leech has two daughters. They are give. 3 are not satisfied. 4 that never say enough. See, but Paul wasn't the only one teaching against it. The Messiah also taught against preaching for pay. In Matthew 10, verses 8-9, it reads, heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out demons. You have received without paying. Give without being paid. Do not acquire gold or silver or copper for your money belt. See, the Messiah gave freely. The 12 apostles gave freely. Paul gave freely. Titus gave freely. Timothy gave freely. Timothy was taught by Paul. How does your pastor line up with these teachers? In Acts 3:6, Paul says he did not, not Paul, Peter says he did not have silver and gold. 2 Peter 2:3 says, and in greed, G-R-E-E-D, with fabricated words, they shall use you for gain. From of old their judgment does not linger, and their destruction does not slumber. Titus 1:7 says, for an overseer has to be unreprovable as a managing one of Elohim, not self-pleasing, not wroth, not given to wine, no brawler, not greedy for filthy gain. Matthew 21:13 says, and he said to them, it has been written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of robbers. Jeremiah 6:13 reads, for from the least of them, even to the greatest of them, they are all greedy for gain. And from the prophet even to the priest, all act falsely. And I'm going to end it on this. One guy said a pastor who received a salary for preaching is nothing but a spiritual whore. Those not my words, those are his. I'll talk to you later.